Welcome to Amplify, the video series where we interview thought leaders about best practices, trends, and their experiences in creating engaging campaigns. Today, I'm excited to speak with Emellie O'Brien, the founder and CEO of Earth Angel, a company that specializes in creating sustainable productions for film and television. Emellie and her company have worked on many high-profile productions over the years, bringing expertise in the reduction of environmental impact to the entertainment industry. We are honored to have you, Emellie O'Brien. Welcome to Amplify.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I've got so many questions for you, and sustainability has really become super important to us at our company. But let me start out talking about your company and your name origin story. It's got a fun, background to that. It comes from a nickname of yours. Tell us the story.
Sure. Yeah. So I went to NYU to study film and television. I thought that I was gonna become this big shot producer, right? I had these big dreams and goals going into film school. And it was while I was studying at Tisch and I started interning at Focus Features back when they were headquartered in New York, that I started to work on their Focus on Green initiative. And I started to learn about the very early days of the sustainable production movement. And I got connected to a producer at Big Beach Films who was starting up a feature film in New York. And I basically solicited to him, can I green your production? And without really even knowing what that meant at the time, he was very gracious and said, sure, let's take a shot at this and see what happens. And it was on that film set, my very first time working in sustainability and production in the summer of 2011, where I was at the craft service table and I was sorting through the trash, separating the recyclables and the organic waste for composting and etc. When a crew member on that production came up to me and was just sort of baffled, was like, what are you doing? What is happening here? And I explained to him my role and I was here to make the production more sustainable. And he just looked at me and said, you're some kind of an earth angel. And lo and behold, other people on the crew kind of picked up on this. I started getting called this on walkie. And then once you're called something on walkie, that's it. That's your name forever. So it became my nickname on sets when I was just freelancing as a sustainability coordinator on productions. And so when I decided to launch the business officially, it was kind of a no-brainer what we were going to call it.
Oh, that's awesome. And what year was that?
I launched Earth Angel in 2013.
2013. Okay. So so a lot has changed in sustainability during the past 10 years. At that time, was it clear to you that this could be a sustainable business model, or was there still a lot of doubts around whether this was going to work as a business?
I think there were a lot of doubts initially, mainly because we just didn't understand at that time what the actual impact of production was. There was not large data sets around what the carbon footprint was and what all these environmental metrics were. We now have a lot of that information and data. And a report was actually published in March of 2020 that collated some of the data from the large studio productions and gave averages of, this is what a Hollywood tentpole's carbon footprint might be. This is what an hour-long scripted drama television series might be. So we've come an enormous way in that regard. But yeah, initially it was just kind of, what even is the footprint? What is the impact? How do we quantify this? We're such a transient industry. We're only around for days, weeks, months at a time, and then we dissolve. So kind of figuring out how to tackle this on the production model, I think, was one of the biggest challenges at first.
And at that time, did people know that this was important? Were they acknowledging that? Or I'm sure that that's gotten like a lot higher priority as the years have gone on. But was that a fight, just letting people know that this is important?
It was an enormous fight. Ellen. It was enormous. When I would talk to a lot of producers and production managers about this in the early days, I would just kind of get that blank faced stare. It's like that of just the sentiment really was, this isn't in my job description. My job is to produce this film or television series on time and within budget. That's my job description. And so I think people really didn't get that at first. It took a lot of climate communication tactics at work there. But a shift really happened, I would say, kind of late 2019. And I noticed this. It was a really tangible shift because most of the time when I would have these early preliminary conversations with producers, I'd be on a call with them or in a meeting, and I'd have to spend the first 15 minutes of the conversation talking about the why climate change is an issue, how our industry is contributing to it, why we all have a role to play in this. And then I noticed this shift where all of a sudden people were like, yeah, I get it. Like, now tell me about the how. Like, how are we addressing it, right? So it was very tangible. It was like, oh, okay, there's a level of awareness now where I get to kind of leapfrog and really get into the meat of the discussion, which is, okay, now what are we going to do about it and how are we going to address it?
Yeah, that's really cool. And then the pandemic came. And how was there any difference that you noted? Obviously, everything shut down during the pandemic, but then afterwards, were people, did they have to be reminded why this was important, or were they right back into it, ready to be more sustainable and earth friendly?
Yeah, I was really concerned when production started to come back online with the new COVID restrictions that this was going to be kicked back to the back burner and not prioritized. But I have to say, pretty much all of our productions brought us back with them. Even, with all the added COVID requirements, we had to make adjustments to our approach, certainly, but it wasn't deprioritized in the way that I was afraid it was going to be deprioritized. So I was very optimistic about that. However, I think the challenge now is, with a lot of the COVID restrictions lessening, is about kind of illuminating how the industry completely changed the way it worked in a matter of months. All of a sudden, health and safety departments existed, COVID budget line items were added, testing, and PPE, like all of these resources were allocated to address COVID like the crisis it was, right? We addressed it like the public health crisis it was. Now, what I think is really the communication tactic that we're trying to deploy in the industry is, we need to address climate like the crisis it is, in the same level of urgency, in the same level of resource allocation. That isn't quite there yet. And that's what I would love to see accelerated, because, while we have come a long way in tracking and understanding what our impact is, there's still a lot of work to be done in reducing it and, achieving net zero.
So you designed your company, I believe, so that you could be scalable. From the beginning, you're always thinking like that. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? Like, how did you know that was going to be important? And then what were some of the things that you put in place so that you could scale? I mean, I know that you can tell us, but you've got like international expansion now. Back when we were talking years ago, you were doing some work overseas, and you've got all kinds of things going on. So how were you able to set that up?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we're still actively scaling and figuring out how to scale in a conscious way, right? I think that's the real challenge for a lot of businesses. But for me, I was always a very kind of process focused person, right? Like, we're gonna experiment with a process. We're gonna see how this works when we work with the electric department in this way to try to reduce our energy consumption, or work with the catering department in this way to try to, reduce our waste consumption, whatever it is, and kind of documenting processes. That to me is like one of the most critical components of how Earth Angel has scaled historically. And, being a consulting agency, people are coming to us for that knowledge and that expertise, right? So with every new hire that we're making as we're expanding, I need quick and easy ways to download to these new hires. Well, here's how it's been done before. Here are ways that we're still, doing a lot of R&D and innovating where there's opportunities for improvement. People have to be kind of able to jump in and understand, what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so that to me has been a really critical component of scaling as a service-based company, right? I think service-based and product-based companies scale in radically different ways. And so that's been a lot of what I've had to learn. And then, scaling consciously as well has been a big part of this. So, we saw a lot of growth in that kind of after productions figured out how to shoot during COVID period, which I'm very fortunate for. Like there was a real kind of market demand for this service in a way that there had not been. And I think we learned a lot in that period in terms of what it takes in terms of resource allocation to all of a sudden service double the amount of productions that we were servicing previously. So it was a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of mistakes that get made, certainly along the way that you learn from and you grow from. But we've also put a tremendous amount of effort, and I really give a lot of credit to my director of operations and culture on this in, scaling the company in terms of our culture and how are we making this an amazing place to work for everybody. And that's always something that's kind of top of mind for me. And, in terms of attracting talent, retaining talent, that's been a really big focus for us in this kind of like next tier of scaling as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And making that a priority is something I think a lot of companies miss the mark when they forget that part. So, kudos to you for making that important and keeping that important as you grow. How do you kind of explained that this idea of sustainability is much more widely accepted and people are, certainly hearing news and, it is really not a question of why we have to do this or if we have to do this. We just have to get on this train. But that said, when you're coming into a production, is there some kind of process you go through or some kind of tricks you have to kind of like get the production company excited about, kind of being part of the team and working with you?
Totally. A lot of working in the sustainability space is about meeting people where they are. So if I'm working with for example, a producer who's very enthusiastic about sustainability efforts and measures, I'm going to take a different approach than if I'm working with someone who's never encountered this before, maybe is a little more skeptical, has never seen it in action before. So it's a lot of, kind of understanding your audience, I guess, in that way. But some of the tools, that I would use are, let's say like a skeptic, more of a skeptic. I focus a lot on the business case. So we've shown that if you really adopt these initiatives in the fullest capacity, more often than not, there are cost savings to be had. Areas where we've seen this, for example, is when we're able to reduce our fuel consumption by, renting more hybrid and EV vehicles, downsizing the size of our generators that we need, or opting for, alternative electric generators. All of these have cost savings potential because we're no longer spending all that money on fuel. So it's about kind of challenging people to maybe rethink the way things have been done in the past and showing the kind of cost benefit of these measures. Now, all of that requires kind of being able to get in on the ground floor early enough to influence those discussions. And so I think that still kind of remains a challenge for us. But when you get in early enough, it's also an opportunity to get people more excited because they're not bogged down in the weight of, oh no, we go to camera in 2 weeks and, everything's still kind of a mess to organize before then. If you get people when they're calmer and earlier in the pre-production phase, they can think about it and kind of digest it in a more strategic way, basically, because we work with really, really creative people all the time. The creative sector is just, there's no limits to what we can achieve. So being able to kind of tap into those people's creativity and energize it and excite it, I think is essential, but it's got to happen early enough before they're in kind of panic mode.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say we work with really, really stressed out people all the time. So oftentimes that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great, great explanation, and coming in early makes a lot of sense. Looking into your crystal ball, where do you see, looking at the future of the film and television industry, where do you see kind of like the environmental impact, sustainability? Where do you see all of this going eventually? Are we just going to be making AI films with no set whatsoever, no actors, no craft services?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, yeah, the power of virtual production now is really, I think, challenging the MO of how productions have been made. I'm really curious to kind of see how that progresses. But I think that, kind of the immediate thing that's on people's horizons right now is the focus on decarbonization. And we know that is the number one source of any production's carbon footprint, whether that's fuel from the passenger vehicles that move the people around, the generators that power the sets, or the fleet of vehicles moving equipment around. It is our biggest challenge that we're up against. So I think that, we're already starting to see this, but I only think it's going to scale the amount of like clean energy and clean technology that we're deploying. Really cool advancements happening in that space. Actors' trailers now being run completely on solar, things like that. And the elimination of the diesel generator on set, I know, is something that everyone's really kind of zeroed in at the moment. So I'm excited about that potential. I'm excited about a stronger kind of circular economy approach in our sector as well. There's a lot of, the take, make, dispose linear economy happening in our world, mostly because of the pace that we have to move. But I think that there's opportunity to kind of explore more circularity solutions, more creative reuse solutions. So I'm really energized by that. And then I also think another really key component is the social side of sustainability, right? It's not just about environment. It's about the 3 Ps: people, profit, and planet. And I think that the social side is also really exciting. So how do we get to more humane work hours in our industry? How do we make it so that, it's more equitable and women aren't having to leave the workforce, and, there's more racial and gender equality and inclusion initiatives, both like in front of the camera and behind the camera. I think all of these things are kind of coalescing at a very, interesting kind of tipping point time. And I think the conversation really needs to be about, this is all about future proofing the industry, like making it so it's sustainable, so that we can continue to tell these stories and be creative professionals for many, many years to come, and in a way that, includes a diverse representation of stories too.
Emellie, so much great content. I'm really excited to be having this conversation, but I want to switch gears because, I'm a business owner, you're a business owner. And one of the realities of being a business owner is you have to market your business. Even when you have a relatively unique business as you do, you still have competition, you still have to educate people. So what kind of marketing have you done that's been successful for Earth Angel?
Sure. Yeah, we've had a big emphasis on event marketing. We find that, when it comes to reaching our target audience of, film and television producers, studio executives, folks of that nature, being able to have those really personal interactions and tell the story of what we do and show the examples of what we do, I think has really had tremendous value. So an example of this is we partner with the Hollywood Climate Summit. We've been partnering with them for the past few years, and we host, as part of the summit, the big sort of networking cocktail hour event that we call Eco Bash. And it's a way of like inviting a lot of influencers, decision makers into this space, kind of showcasing what it is that we're doing, and just inviting, more dialogue and awareness around this. So that's been a big part of what we've done. And then we've since started to launch pop-ups, Eco Bash pop-ups. So we just did one at the Sundance Film Festival in January, which was really successful. And so that's been a big focus for us. I also have to give a ton of credit to my director of marketing and publicity, and her team, because they have just done a phenomenal job of kind of getting this message out there to, our industry trade publications. And we've been really blessed to have some articles written about us and, in the trades like Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, etc. So that's been great exposure. And they do a phenomenal job too with just our digital marketing. Like the website looks amazing, the social media, the newsletter. I give all the credit to them, my marketing and publicity team. They've just done a really phenomenal job with that.
That's absolutely awesome. And I know you have these great events and everything, which is kind of like I want to say it's uniquely yours. You certainly do make the events uniquely yours. So we always like to ask our guests if they have used video content and if that's been helpful for them. Have you guys delved into that world, and in what ways has it been helpful?
We have a bit, actually. So at the event that I just mentioned that we've been hosting now annually, Eco Bash, we tend to do like a sizzle reel video content, because I think with a lot of what we're doing, because it's a new concept to people as well, people are like, sustainable production consulting agency, like what does that mean? It's not something like, I provide plumbing services, and people understand what that means right away. Like there's a lot of kind of explaining what that is. So we try to do more showing rather than telling. So kind of capturing, it's hard to capture video content of what we do on our sets kind of in real time because of the like non-disclosure, agreements that we have to sign. But we do get a lot of kind of photo content that we'll kind of clip together and make good reels out of. We've dabbled in stuff like TikTok. I am not a TikToker personally, but doing more of that kind of like really quick to the point reels that also kind of have more of an education slant to them as well. I know that that's been, we've gotten a lot of traction and follows and interaction from that. So that's something we've looked at more of as well. But I think there's certainly more opportunity and room for improvement to expand on that.
Sure. I mean, I could imagine video working really well for you just because you're so passionate, knowledgeable, authentic. If you were to be in the videos, that would certainly come across in your team as well. So yeah, well, more to come on that in the future. That's exciting. What do you think, if there was one change you could implement by snapping your fingers right now, and could implement a change across the film and television industry, and you think it would make a huge impact, what would that be?
I think it goes back to what I was saying before about the resource allocation. If we can allocate resources to a sustainability budget line item, really a sustainability department line item, in the way we did with COVID and health and safety, it would be such a game changer. Because the reality is that there are green premium costs associated with some of the sustainability efforts we're taking. The cost of renting a hybrid or EV is more than the cost of renting an internal combustion engine vehicle, as an example. So even if you do see those savings on the back end, I think there needs to be a stronger resource allocation, a leveling of the playing field to encourage people to kind of take that jump. And if there were that kind of safety net of a fund allocation, I think people would be more inclined to do so. So I think that's a big component of it. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things I could say, but another one I'll mention too is if we were to integrate sustainability measures with the film tax incentives. So, many of the states have very enticing film tax credits that draw these major productions to their states. And, they get a rebate on the qualified spend for the economic output that they're bringing. They're creating jobs. They're lots of small businesses are benefiting from those productions being there. If there could be a link to making those productions more sustainable in addition to qualifying for a tax incentive, I think that would be a complete game changer for the industry, which is something that we've been paying really close attention to and trying to advocate for. It's a very political process, of course, but I think that there is really strong potential there too.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, that's something I would love to see too. That's a great idea. What about for like a smaller mid-sized company, not necessarily in the film industry? Are there, maybe even small things that the average company could do to reduce their carbon footprint or become more climate friendly or sustainable that you could maybe things people wouldn't think of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think an easy thing, an easy switch that anyone can really look at is their sourcing and their kind of purchasing policies. Like what are the goods and materials that you are sourcing as a company, and are there ways to shift your dollars to a more sustainable alternative, whether that's something really simple like recycled content paper in your office, or eliminating single-use plastics in your break room. I think that's kind of a universal kind of low-hanging fruit that we're always asking people to think about, because we vote with our dollars every day. And so if you're more conscientious about what you're spending your money on, or if there's sustainable certifications, like in our industry with film and TV, we look to the Forest Stewardship Council certification, FSC, to source our lumber that we use to construct a lot of our sets. So kind of taking a look at that, I think, is a really good way to go about it. And like, are there ways that you can be more creative about reusing items that you're dealing with? And in terms of a carbon footprint standpoint, that's really where you want to look at, how much energy are you consuming? How much fuel are you consuming as a company, which kind of often requires like a little bit more of an in-depth analysis, or sometimes infrastructure upgrades. But there are also really good tax credit initiatives for this too, that you can take advantage of for some of your like energy upgrades, for example. And there's lots of programs out there to kind of offset those costs too. So yeah, without kind of completely dominating the conversation with what people can do, I'll sort of summarize it there. But I think it's also about really communicating that this is important to you as an organization, right? Like something as simple as drafting a sustainability commitment statement. You don't have to be perfect. Everybody's a work in progress with this. Sustainability is a spectrum, and there's a lot. It's a very multifaceted topic that affects the operations of, and inner workings of any organization really in a thorough way. But if you just kind of approach it of like, we're going to take these steps, and get there step by step, and this is a work in progress for us, I think that says a lot in terms of your, transparency and accountability to the cause.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know, like for our own company, it's hugely important. It's a top priority to work on our sustainability. We're working towards a certification, but that's not why we're doing it. And it can feel overwhelming sometimes when you look at all the things. Once the awareness happens, and you're like, oh, these are all the things we could be doing. It's good to hear you say, just start swimming, just start moving towards the goal, and don't beat yourself up for not getting there immediately, because it's a process. It's a process. It's going to take time. Yeah. So, Emellie, thank you for talking with me. Those are all of my questions. I just, is there anything that you would like to share that I didn't ask you, or, let me just, leave it there. Is there anything else that you would like to say about these topics?
No, I mean, I think you asked such great questions, Ellen. Nothing else that I would add. Just, for folks maybe that are interested in kind of learning more about this topic or this intersection, definitely check out our website, earthangelsets.com. And we're on social media at earthangelsets, SETS as well. And yeah, I think even if you're a person who has nothing to do with the film and television industry, I'm sure you're a person who consumes content. Most of us do. So know that you as an audience member too can be more kind of aware and educated as to like what productions are making strides towards more sustainable practices and habits, and advocating for more sustainable stories on screen too. Not every climate story needs to be like doom and gloom apocalypse, day after tomorrow kind of story. Like we're really seeing a diversity of climate storytelling right now that I think is really exciting and helping paint the future of what could be in a more positive way, not just in a sort of apocalyptic doom and gloom way. So yeah, I'd say where we can support those stories and where people can get more involved in their level of awareness there, that's always great too.
Oh, awesome. Great tips. Thank you. Thank you for being on Amplify. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and so much great information. It was awesome talking to you.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you too.